Hello, my friends. Well, today is a very special episode because it is the call recording of a recent autistically ED free membership call. And it's a call that resonated with my soul on a level that's honestly one of the deepest dimensions I feel connection. It's what I call, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, the neurodivergent energy coalescence. So, like I said, what you're about to listen to is a recent autistically ED free membership call in which we chat about how giftedness can feel like pressure rather than a gift. I introduce the term existential claustrophobia, which, in a nutshell, I describe as the acute awareness of being a boundless creative that's confined by the limitations of physical reality. We delve into alexithymia and how this label doesn't even begin to encompass the depth and breadth of the explosion of emotions and sensations autistic people feel all at once. And most importantly, what I hope you'll take away from today's recording is the power of authentic connection, which is perhaps the most beautiful form of creative expression that there is. If this call resonates with you, me and the other members of the Autistically AD Free membership would love for you to join us in the community, which you can do at livelabelfree.com/membership. When you join, you'll get instant access to the entire backlist of previously recorded calls. You'll have 24/7 access to our private community to ask questions, to share wins, and to receive support whenever you need it. And, of course, you'll be able to join us live each week for soul deep conversations like the one you're about to listen to. Honestly, my friend, I am just astounded at how I, for the first time in my life, get to experience each week what it's like to be surrounded by so many kindred spirits that speak my language and operate on what's best described as a divine dimension. So, if you're tired of this fast paced, shallow, AI generated world we are living in, and you want true, meaningful, neurodivergent human connection, come join us in the membership at livelabelfree.com/membership. And now, let's dive into the membership call. There was a really interesting conversation going on in the community between me and Eva for the past few days, and Nico chimed in today about the needing to earn your existence, which I think is so many ways we can interpret that, and especially experiencing one's giftedness as pressure rather than a gift. I think that almost in and of itself can be interconnected, and I personally relate to that on many levels because I know I am very gifted, and when I do the things that I know I am most gifted at, I realize that's when I have the most fight or flight response within myself because it feels almost like a demand. And I think the fight or flight response, when you mix that with the demand avoidance, it's like, I don't want to feel this pressure, so I'm not going to tap into that gift. And in the grand scheme of things, on a larger scale, that's kind of how the eating disorder again comes in as this protective mechanism. Is you don't have to face your giftedness, you don't have to confront the here I go again with the existential angst of not using your gifts correctly, of being wrong in the world. That's where the eating disorder comes in because it shields you from all kind of responsibility. And what's coming up right now for me is that fear of being healthy, fear that I can't handle being healthy in this world. That again also ties back to the giftedness and something that I wouldn't say it was a therapist, but like back in 2013, 2014, when I was really struggling with my own eating disorder, and I was very fragile. I literally looked like, you could just knock me over. But anyways, I went to this therapist guy who was very immersed in, the universe and the cosmos, and he was always talking about how everything is connected. And he was one of the first people that said to my mom, Livia is afraid of her own power, her own potential, her own vastness. And at the time, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no power. I have no potential. But now, reflecting back, like more than a decade later, I know exactly what he meant. And that's kind of unconsciously what the eating disorder numbed me from. It made everything so quiet that I didn't have to face my own vastness. And that's where the masking comes in too. And I actually have a podcast coming out next week about autism and masking. I know a topic, Amy, that you're interested in talking more about. And the main idea of that episode is that we don't only mask to shield our true self from society because we know we can't conform and we're afraid of what comes with that. But the masking is also a way to hide from our own vastness. It's like a way to hide from our own true identity because that identity is so expansive. I promise I'm going to stop talking, but I feel like it can be helpful to just put out there everything I'm thinking so that some of you guys can maybe think about, oh, that's something I'd like to dive into more. Because I've been having like private conversations with everyone on this call the past week. And I was having a chat with, not a chat, an email back and forth with Nico about this trapped feeling that I've been describing a lot recently, this sense of feeling claustrophobic in my own body. And Nico, I was so glad that you sent me that email the other day because Nico said, maybe this is dysphoria, what you're experiencing, because dysphoria doesn't necessarily have to be like gender dysphoria. It can be just not feeling at home in a body. And I responded to Nico, I said, I think you're onto something and I appreciate it. And what I experience doesn't resonate with dysphoria. I think what I experienced, I actually came up with the term for it yesterday. And I was so happy I found this term: existential claustrophobia. And how I define it, I'm going to bring up my notes here because I sent it to my mom. I sent in WhatsApp to my mom in all caps. I finally found the name for what I feel: existential claustrophobia. And I describe it as the acute awareness of being a boundless being confined within finite physical form. And it's a profound sense of constraint experienced when your internal expansiveness almost pushes against the walls of the material limitations of existence. And then I go further and I say the distress that emerges from recognizing that one's potential for creation, thought, and experience exceeds what can be actualized or materialized or physically expressed within a single lifespan or physical vessel. So I know that that's like really freaking intense, but I was so happy that I came up with this term because I mean, like, that's what it feels like for me. Like, I feel like my insides, my soul, my being has so many ideas, has so many thoughts, has so many ways of interpreting things. Like, even in my writing, more and more, like, every phrase I write, every sentence, every word I choose, it feels like the biggest existential choice. It's like, well, there's another way we could say that. Maybe you should use a metaphor, or maybe you should use this metaphor. And that infinity of creativity and possibility is so overwhelming to this physical body to the point where I'm constantly exhausted by how infinite my being is. And okay, where am I going with this? Is that ties back to the ultimate question, which I'd love to talk about today, which I talked about with Anna and Katie yesterday. And that is, how do you handle being in a body? How do you accept waking? How do you accept being healthy in a body? So I've just been talking for 9 minutes, but hopefully that what I just said, A, resonates with anyone, and B, I'm curious if there are any specific points along what I just said that you'd like to dive deeper into. Okay, so where shall we start? Yep, and Elma says, if I'm starving, I don't have to handle facing my gifts. I don't have to take the responsibility to use my gifts, and I can reduce the overwhelm by engaging with the eating disorder behaviors. I'm healthy now, but it's so hard. Well, it's not I'm healthy now, but it's so hard. It's healthy now, and it's so hard. And I'm right there with you. And I think that's why, for me, I am choosing more and more to unmask and share these things that I struggle with a lot. Because as I've said before, I'm no sage on the stage. I'm not here to be like, oh yeah, when you recover from your eating disorder, life is magically paradise and wonderful, which that freaking ticks me off, on Instagram. I'm sure we all know, and I talked about this in the podcast that went out yesterday, when people have these like before and after things of like, when I was in an eating disorder, like I was crying at the pasta, and then like they have the after of them like traveling and doing all the things and hanging out with their friends. And this isn't to like discredit that, because I do believe, life is infinitely better when you don't have an eating disorder. That's why I don't have an eating disorder anymore, because I wouldn't be able to do anything meaningful, like truly meaningful, if I was still engaging with restriction and limitation and fear and all that. And I think, especially for the neurodivergent being that, is constantly reading between the lines, is constantly asking, why? Why? Okay, but why? Okay, but why? To everything, that there's no arguing, like objectively, that is absolutely exhausting. And it's really hard. And I face those thoughts every single day. As I said I don't know if I said this on the last call, but I said it to another client. I said, I often procrastinate going to bed because it is too painful to just lay there with my thoughts. And I definitely, I don't mean to make this really negative at all, but so for me, that's kind of, it's been really intense, just especially the past few months. But I think for me, and this is where I know that I've grown a lot as a human being, a human person, a soul trapped in the body, is that deep inside me, I trust that I'm going to like not figure this out, but I trust that all of this, let's say confusion, pain, overwhelm, like I trust that it's going to channel into something meaningful. And that's kind of similar to how the eating disorder, it has now channeled into being able to connect with you all. It channeled into me being able to write books. It channeled into me having a podcast. And that's why I wouldn't trade that experience for growing up and feeling like I was the kid who fit in and everyone loved me and everyone had friends, because maybe I'd just be now a cog in a wheel if I grew up as the cog in the wheel already. And yeah, I mean, it's no wonder that many, 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 all artists have their own deep struggles. Like when you read about, some of the most famous writers like Virginia Woolf and Franz Kafka, and many of them, we're just gonna say, the reason they're able to write so well is because they know they have their own experiences of that deep pain, and they channel that pain and fear and existential angst, they channel it into their writing, and that's what makes their writing so rich. So, people, this is like becoming so like a private podcast. Is there anything I do want to know? Like, oh, so something in the chat. It's really helpful that you share your struggles. Okay, this is so validating, because like I'm having huge imposter syndrome right now. Of like, oh my gosh, like they must think I'm like a total psychopath. Like it's all about me, and they must think like what a fraud I am. Like I'm supposed to be inspiring and empowering, and now I'm just talking about how hard it is to exist as an autistic person. Um, yeah, okay, let's come back to Earth, Olivia. Are there certain things that I have said, or even things that I have not said, that you're like, I was not expecting this from you, that you'd want to talk about today? And if so, please toss them in the chat, because I'd love to actually have a conversation now.
Hi, it's Anna and Katie.
Hi.
We personally, we love hearing you talk, because you are inspiring and empowering and amazing, and yeah, so interesting. It's brilliant. But my thoughts on that, what you said there, totally agree. And I think for neurodiverse people, like we're almost trying to learn the lesson of how to pull back from having to understand everything, or how to
Yes.
let things be, or because our minds are so active and we have
Yep.
such strong emotions for things.
Yep.
And I think with neurodiverse people, their lessons are probably to maybe become a bit more aware of their emotions and their creativity. And it's so funny because we're on this earth at the same time as neurotypicals and neurodiverse people, but yet we're struggling with the very opposite of each other's lessons in
Yes.
a way. But yeah, I do think with neurodiverse people like us, it's like our emotions are so strong because we're really living. Like when we're feeling happy, we feel like on a high that nobody could ever explain, or when we feel low, we feel like the worst feeling ever. Whereas I
Yes.
think neurotypical people go through life on autopilot, and that's really safe and lovely sometimes to think that you could live your life that way. But in other ways, you're thinking, what's the point in living if you don't go through really strong experiences to feel emotions and to struggle to learn through them struggles.
Yes.
So I totally understand what you're talking about.
Thank you so much for reflecting that. Yeah, what you said, I just made a note about learn how to pull back from all our thoughts. I think that is so poignantly and so well said. And it reminds me of what we were talking about yesterday on a one-on-one call about how autistic people, neurodivergent people, they walk through life with like a magnifying glass on everything. And again, it's a gift because we are able to read between the lines. It's because we are able to express and see and comprehend details that other people, the neurotypical brain just automatically filters out. That's actually called sensory gating, because I've been doing research on this, that neurotypical people, their brains are much better at automatically, effortlessly filtering out any information that they deem as irrelevant. And that's why someone can go into a cafe and not notice 8 different stimuli at the same time, whereas the autistic mind is like everything is coming in at once, and that is so overwhelming. That's like, I need to be alone, I need to get out of this. And then what you said about the emotions and feelings emotions so strongly, something that came up last week with the client was the question, how do you handle being in a body when you feel everything so intensely? Like not even like just emotions, but every sensory sensation in your body, you feel it like it's being put under a magnifying glass. And I think that's why, the stomach needing to be good and not allowed to be too bloated and stuff. Like I think that traditional providers, at least in my experience, it was like it's normal for the body to change, it's normal for this, it's normal, blah blah blah. And like logically, like I didn't disagree with them. Like I mean, like of course it's normal for things to change and evolve, but I think in the neurodivergent body, when those things change and evolve, for us it's like amplified change. It's like trying to think of a metaphor right now, and I'm blanking, which is which is odd for me, but probably because I'm having so many thoughts. But going back to the emotions thing, I had kind of an epiphany a few weeks ago when I was thinking about, the eating disorder being a form of autistic masking. And I was writing the other day about how like words in and of itself feel like a mask for me. And I specifically wrote, words will always fail me. They will never say exactly what I want to say. They will never encompass the breadth and depth of the explosion of energy I have inside me, which kind of ties back to this abundant, creative, vast soul being like trying to put it into like a little jewelry box. Like nothing wrong with the box, but the soul can never fit in there because it's infinite. Just like you can never say we're gonna just put the universe in the glass for now. It's like no, that's not possible. And ultimately, maybe this is not your jam. Maybe this is or isn't your jam, but ultimately we are all one. We are all the universe, right? That's why when we're born, we don't actually come into the world. We come out of the world's matter. Like that's what happens. And when we die, our being just coalesces once again with the atmosphere and the matter and all the things. And That's funnily enough, that's actually why, not to get really like dark here, but like that's why I'm actually not afraid of like death or dying at all, because I'm not afraid that my soul is going to die, because I see everything as one. And I think that's why for me, this idea of, seeing this body as just the vessel, as the jewelry box that carries snapshots of my soul around, where depending on where I am, has been really helpful for me, because I don't if this body feels uncomfortable, it's not like, oh, this body isn't mine, so it now the bloating, like I love feeling bloated. No, like it's uncomfortable. But because I no longer use this body as a means to define myself or my soul, because those two things I do see them as separate, it's allowed me to stop giving sensations of the body like power or control over how my being experiences those sensations and experiences this life. Back to what I was saying about the emotion thing, the epiphany I had was about alexithymia, which we've talked about it before. Like it's typically considered an inability to recognize emotions, right? And I've actually written before, like that alexithymia is way more common among autistic people. And now I feel like, and I can't go there because that's not realistic. And people are like, no, Olivia, like you can't do that. But like so many of my perceptions have become so much more nuanced as I've developed as a human, as I've developed this content, that I feel like what I said 3 years ago about alexithymia, like I could never say it like that's how it is, because I see it as a lot more nuanced now. And what I mean with that is, I think that in neurodivergent people, alexithymia may not actually be an inability or a difficulty with emotions at all. I think that, and I'm curious to any of your thoughts on this, because I know that Amy, we've talked about alexithymia too before. Um, I think that it's that emotions themselves are labels, and thus they're another way to push the complex, infinite, vast, abundant experience into the jewelry box, right? That once again, the autistic being can never fit into. So I think when we say alexithymia is a common experience in neurodivergent people, I think what we're actually saying is that the emotional, spiritual, intellectual, all encompassing experience is just too vast and nuanced to be dwindled down to, I feel joy right now, or I feel happiness right now. Because when I feel joy or happiness, it is like not even on an emotional spectrum anymore. It is like joy mixed with happiness, mixed with excitement, mixed with euphoria, mixed with, I have found my purpose in this life. And then the next day, when I can't write anymore and I dissociate because my brain is tired from all of that energy, that's like, oh my gosh, that was so great. I'm like, there's no purpose in living. I feel sad. I feel depressed. I feel any negative thing you can think of, I feel all of it at the same time. So it's like, it's not that I have difficulty pinpointing an emotion. It's because you can't, because there isn't one. It's all of them at the same time. So I'm curious if
Yeah,
anyone resonates with that.
I just have to say, I'm like, oh my God, what you're saying, you've actually, I even said words at the very same time and you said them and I was like, what you're saying makes so much sense. And I suppose my example would be, I'm an artist and I was born, I love painting and I love art and I love, and like what you've said there about words, when you think of words, there are a few letters that somebody else invented to make shapes of,
Yes,
that are stuck
exactly.
together to make sounds, but are like,
Yes,
oh, they're like word noises. And we're so restricted because we also have different languages there as well. So it's even more restricted. And you have these like sounds that you can string together to try to express an emotion that is like so beyond these little sounds that we're making with our mouths.
yes,
And I would say even with painting, it's like I can paint a picture and I can have the choice of like the primary colors, let's say red,
right.
yellow, blue, and black and white.
Hmm.
But from them colors, like in my head, I could paint like anything, but in reality, my mind has colors in my head that I've never seen in real life.
Yes,
So
Yes.
yeah, I could paint anything, but in reality, I could never paint what I want to paint because I have never visually seen them colors in real life. So like that, it's very hard to express yourself in any way with others when we don't really have the tools to do that. So I
I,
know exactly what you're talking about.
I,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like what you just said about seeing the colors in your head that don't exist. Well, they exist because they do exist in your mind, and arguably everything is a construct of the human mind right now. But not like, yeah, them not like having ever seen them in like real life, so to say. That is exactly what I have with my writing. I don't know if I said this before, but I tell my mom like that all the books that I want to write are literally like they're already written. Like in my mind, in my body, like they're already written. And I think what art is, and this is why I always come back to this idea of stop looking for the answers because the answers are already within you. But I think that this lifetime and meeting other people and connecting with other people and learning and being a lifelong learner and adopting this curiosity mindset of I'm opening myself up to discovering what I don't yet know kind of thing. I think the function of that is not because the answers are outside, but it's because those stepping stones along the way, they help us access the answers that are already within us. And I think, to be an artist, basically what art is essentially is turning these things inside you, these explosions of energy, it's materializing it. That's what it is. And for my writing, all the books that I literally have already written in my head, in my body, which of course creates the is the foundation of that tension, which I call existential claustrophobia, is like I know that it already exists, but it doesn't exist out here. And that contrast is so great that it becomes painful almost to have all of that inside of you, and for the physical body to not be able to materialize that at the same rate at which your mind is going. And a metaphor that I wrote about, literally it's a metaphor I came up with August of last year because I know that I had come up with it, and I was like, I'm going to look up when I posted this on Instagram, and I talked about the mind, my mind feeling like a treadmill that's going at infinity speed, and the body can't keep up with the mind. And that's why, no shit Sherlock, that's why I talk so fast, because I realize that, not unconsciously because I'm acutely aware of it obviously, but I realize that my voice, this physical body, this physical vessel that allows me to communicate and express, is is trying and failing to match the speed at which my brain is thinking. And that's why what often happens is I'll say, wait, what? I don't even know what I was talking about. Because my brain is already here and my body's like, hold up, like, no, like we're not there yet. And that disconnect, that making the space for not my body to catch up, because I know it never will. But what I just said, actually, this idea of I know my body will never catch up, that has been a really hard thing to acknowledge for myself. And it's been kind of liberating for me because when I have all these thoughts, I've been in phases of my life where I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to write it. And I was just writing down the whole day to the point where I was like, this is, I can never do anything with all of these thoughts in this one lifetime. So, so I started asking myself, like, and that's kind of how I came to that epiphany. It's not even an epiphany, but for me, it was an epiphany. I experienced it as an epiphany of like, why do I want to write everything down? Why do I want to put everything out there? It's because I I'm trying to make it real. That's what I'm trying to do because in my body it feels like it's not real. If it's just in my body and no one knows about it kind of thing. But if it's out here and if I write it down and if I turn it into a book or if I turn it into a painting, well then it's suddenly real. And I came to
Yeah,
this
I think, to me, just listening to you, to me, what that is, it's like sometimes we're trying to prove ourselves to others because when you're stuck in your own head with all these colors or these words
yes,
that don't exist, it's very lonely.
yes,
And like sometimes maybe our existence here is to try to get that information out to connect with another soul that can
yes.
relate with. And that's the frustrating part. But I think maybe what it all boils down to is that we need to just, I don't know, maybe just accept that we can see it in ourselves and we don't
Yep.
have to prove it to anybody else. But it would be nice to share the real feelings or the real emotions with somebody that can understand.
Oh, I'm like I'm feeling like all the emotions right now of like you people just get me, and I think that's why I feel so safe just like sharing all of this so like exposed because I know that I'm not being judged right now. And that feeling, like not to make this about me, but like I think that is again what recovering from the eating disorder, from the eating adaptation, and daring to be the artist that you in your heart already are is trusting that when you create that art, you're going to reach people that are like, that say exactly what Nico just said. Holy crap, Anna. I just figured it out now. I get it. Oh my God. That, Nico, do you care to elaborate? Because my brain is like, tell me more about this.
So like I was like getting what you meant about like the existential claustrophobia like over the last like few weeks. I was getting what you meant, but I was like, I don't think I feel like that.
Uh-huh.
Um I know that I have like kind of I'm like nowhere near as creative as I was as a kid. And I've kind of like lost that. I wish I hadn't. I absolutely wish I hadn't. I feel sometimes I feel like I've almost got it. Um but I don't.
Before you continue, I've lost my creativity. I'm writing this down because we're gonna talk about this, Nico.
Um anyways, yes, I was kind of like, I knew what you were talking about, but I was like, this isn't something that I really experienced. And then when Anna started talking about art, I just had this like kind of like it just kind of clicked in my head. And I was like, what about those times when like you're listening to music and it feels like you literally need to become the sound waves, or like you can see what the music sounds like, and
Yeah.
it's like I used to dance when I was younger, and I'm
Mhm.
just like I kind of need to dance to this, but then like I don't because I'm either like in public or I'm in my bedroom or something,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, but yeah, it's just like yeah, like I can see what the sound. Okay, I don't know. Some of you might know what I'm talking about here, but
I
when
do. It's like this is again the words fail us. The words fail us.
yeah, so when you used to put like a CD that just had music on into a computer or a laptop and you played it, and
Mhm.
sometimes it would come up with those weird visuals like just like pulsing lines, or
Oh yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
it would be like in a star shape or something, or like multiple overlapping star shapes. It would move around, kind of like some weird screensaver. Like I sort of visualized something a bit like that. And I'm like, okay, that's because I'm listening to this music and I really, really, really like this music. And I just like, I can feel it. I need to become those sound wave moving line things. Yeah. And then I was just like, kind of thought of other ways that I sort of
Mhm.
experience that similarly. Like if I'm uh, watching or reading something that is like really like emotive for me.
Mhm.
I'm just like, I'm too small. I'm too small.
Yep.
I can, I feel like something's trying to not explode out of me, but kind of like try and seep out of me.
Yep.
Or like, yeah, yeah. I just kind of like suddenly was like, oh yeah, you do experience this.
Yeah, and I like what you just said about again like not explode but seep. Like for me, I think again especially the past few weeks. I don't know why, but especially the past few weeks, like I feel like I'm bursting at the seams kind of because there's so much creativity and as Amy said, you can't describe the connection because you just feel the connection. It's like that sense of connection is bursting at the seams. And I think because it like seeps through the seams, maybe this is weird, but like that's what allows it to reach the other person, because some of it is going out of you into the other person. And that is what I mean when I say energy channeling. Like you're letting some of that experience out of you in a way that actually works. What do I mean by that? Like you're not trying to make it go out of you in a way that's like coherent and logical. That's what I mean. Because anything coherent and logical like has been predetermined. That's the definition of coherent and logical. Like the only reason why a map is a map is because someone saw that exact path or saw that territory before. But when you forge your own path, you of course working without a map, because you're creating something, you're embarking on a journey that's never been embarked on before. And I think, kind of tying this back to eating disorders and eating adaptations, and why I prefer the term discovery over recovery. And oh my god, I realized we totally forgot to do the wins. Okay, we'll do that later, because I was of course thinking about my win. And my win this week was that I finished like all the marketing materials and cover design and everything of my next book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery. Woohoo! And in that book, I talk about how what keeps people stuck first in the eating disorder, and then in what I call the next illusion after an eating disorder, which is this recovery identity, is you're still looking for a how-to, you're still looking for a map. And that's why we become, at least for me, I became so obsessed with watching YouTube videos about how other people were eating and how other people were doing recovery. I became so obsessed with reading blogs about like, well, I need to make sure that I'm not doing recovery wrong, because like I can't, like, right, because that's the existential piece. And in that book I talk about like the only true way to find freedom is when you stop trying to look for the map and you say, I trust my own path and I trust my own intuition, and I'm going to walk in a direction that's never ever been walked before. Like, and it's not just north, south, west, east. It's walking in like into another dimension of yourself that you've never allowed yourself to tap into. And I think when we create art, and as you said it so well, Amy, like that feeling of connection to a person or a scene, and arguably connection to yourself, I think what you're actually doing is you're stepping into that other dimension, and you're saying, I trust my being to create and operate from a place that is beyond anything that a logical mind, and thus words, can encompass. So yeah, Elma writes, it feels like I'm going to burst or explode, and I become almost paralyzed because I don't know what to do. This happens so often. You literally, I'm going to copy and paste this to my notes right now. I'm not even kidding you, because you just described exactly what I have, like in one sentence, you've described exactly how I've been feeling. Is I wake up in the morning with 25 fucking hundred ideas, and then it's like, oh, I could do that one, oh, I could do that one. And it's like, it feels like an existential choice, because I know that if I make that decision, I'm cutting myself off from all the other decisions. And like, I don't know if that's a worthwhile trade-off. So I need to like calculate a way where I can do a little bit of all of them, but that's not possible because then I can't go deep into all of them. So I need to pick one, and I'll constantly be ruminating on which is like the best next topic to create. And then I'm so tired because I'm thinking about that the whole time, and then I don't do anything. And that's honestly kind of been happening lately for like the podcast. It's like I have so many podcast ideas that I'm like, I don't know where to start. And then I don't do any. Which isn't true, because obviously I wouldn't have a weekly podcast then. Somehow I figure it out. But I think for me, this is like private podcast again. Like I think something that I'm going to start doing more on the podcast is to just start sharing more like this. Like not like, okay, today we're going to talk about spending money and eating, because it at this point I can't go back to my old style of podcasting, which started out as today's this topic, tomorrow's that topic. It was so coherent and logical and structured that is not in alignment with what my intuition, with my infinite dimension is calling me to do right now. These conversations that we're having now, that honestly I don't think are ever the kind of conversations that I've had when it comes to the eating disorder autism conversation. These are the conversations that it's actually about. I realize, even for me, and you guys can probably tell, like, the excitement and thrill that I'm getting from having this conversation with you all is just so much more impactful than, at this point, what I kind of feel like are just shallow scratching the surface and just addressing the symptoms, because the symptoms of disordered eating are just the manifestation of so much of what we're seeing here. This idea that I don't know if I can handle that 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 giftedness. I don't know if I can handle this just explosion of creativity, because there are so many different ways in which I can express it. And now I just want to come back to Nico, what you were saying about I've lost my creativity. Like, what do you even mean by that?
Like, I like look at, because okay, so I live in a really, well, not really, I live in quite a remote place. Well, that probably doesn't even matter because most of us are probably like the news. I don't go out much. I don't have a whole lot going on. I work from home, so I spend a lot of time online. And a lot of that is actually like looking at like art and stuff, and just looking at like people's, like the creative thing, people's creative outlets. And like I used to write stories all the time when I was a kid. I used to draw for them as well. I did dance, I did gymnastics. I loved creating things, creating anything artistic. And just like I still have that feeling that I want to do those things, but it I just can't bring any creativity to actually do anything. Or like, yeah, I'm like,
Nico,
I have ideas.
sorry. Can I ask, do you feel that maybe you're suppressing your creativity because you feel the people around you won't get it, and that feeling of feeling rejected or misunderstood is so strong that it's easier to not embrace the creativity?
I do have that feeling, but I'd never connected it to why I'm not creative anymore. I absolutely do stop myself from doing things because I'm like, no, people are just going to think that's weird, or yeah. But I'd never connected that to maybe why I can't figure out how to be creative. So that is something to think about.
Well, something that I just, oh, Amy, I'll let you go after, because I saw you put your hand up. Nico, what I'm thinking, the first thing that I'm thinking as you're saying I'm not creative, and that's why I wanted to challenge this, is how are you defining creativity? Because I think that is in and of itself a huge limitation. You're saying, I used to do all these artistic things, but arguably, and maybe this is just me like entertaining the semantic word choice here, entertaining the semantics. But true creativity, I think, has nothing to do with things. It's an experience, it's an expression, it's untouchable, like literally. And yesterday, and I emailed you about this, yesterday, Anna said how much they loved that your example of the growing out of the baby bed a few weeks ago, when we were talking about outgrowing clothes and like how to deal with the changing body. That metaphor is pure art. That's creative. I wouldn't have come up with that because I'm not you, because I have my own way of creative expression. I would have maybe expressed it differently. I did express it differently. And that's what makes you the unique artist that you are, is you have a way of expressing and drawing parallels in a way that no one else could express in the exact way that you did. So I'm curious if just based off what I just said, if there are certain things in your life that you do, that you share, that might be worth reflecting on. Well, maybe this is one way in which I am creative.
I think things like that, like those metaphors, and being able to, yeah, like sometimes describe things in ways like that. Those are kind of the little like insights that show me, yes, you do kind of still have the desire to be, and you maybe have the capacity to be creative. I just can't unlock how to really access that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the little bits like creeping out when I don't quite realize that that's where they're coming from. But yeah, I know this is like completely off topic, so
no,
yeah.
why is this off topic? This is literally the thing, is like, I think trying to stay on topic, and that's why, like, at this point I'm like, even with the podcast, I had a guest on this past weekend, and we were talking about, we were talking about this, feeling not at home in your body. And at some point we started talking about something completely different, and she goes, I don't even know how we got here. and it was hilarious because I said, no, this is so powerful, and I think people are gonna love to listen to this, because this is how the brain works. The brain doesn't think in lines, and because lines are boring, lines are a heart rate monitor that is dead, or the person, you guys know what I'm saying. That's what lines are. That's what balance is. That's what perfection is. It's a flat line where nothing changes, which is the definition of non-existence, right? And what you just said about letting how you've noticed like certain parts come out of you when you almost don't even notice it, like, I think that is actually super powerful in of itself, and it's what I just replied to Elma in the chat. And something that I've had to, not had to, but am acknowledging and understanding more and more, is that every piece of art I create is just that. It's a piece of art. It's a snapshot of this being. And I think when we can acknowledge that no one ever, even if they have 100,000 eyes and magnifying glasses, no one ever is going to be able to see the full picture of our inner landscape. That is ours. That is our little secret. It's an overwhelming secret, but every piece of art you create, every word you say, it's a snapshot. And I think that maybe that's exactly what makes art meaningful, is because it's how that individual at any given moment chose to share. And I don't even know if that makes sense.
No, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And Elma writes, like, the best art I've made has been created when I've let go of expectations and demands and just allowed it to spill out my soul. And I think, Nico, that's often why people love you so much in this community, is because you let things spill out of you, honestly. And obviously I don't want to put words into your mouth, but in a very natural way, where I can just feel that it's coming from your soul and not trying to phrase it in a perfectly coherent way, which I'm sure you're trying to do to some extent. Because right now, even as I've been talking, I'm like, is this even making sense? Like, I need to explain it in a logical, coherent way. But I think when we speak from the heart, whatever that means, when we speak from the soul, rather than trying to make it have this like perfect storyline of here's the anticipation, here's the climax, and just speak what our intuition is asking us to, that's when the most profound connection is made, because that's how other people experience their stories as well. And this is like off topic, but I'm sure we're all familiar with, not familiar, like aware of like how AI has become like the hot topic of today. And I mean, I'm not against AI at all. I think it can be a tool. I think it can be an accommodation, especially for certain tasks that I'm like, my brain does not need to waste existential resources on that right now. I think that in many ways, society at large, let's call them the civilians, have been trying to use AI as almost like a shortcut to connect with people. Like, the amount of Instagram posts nowadays, the captions are literally written by AI. Like, I can't stand it anymore. And I was telling someone else, like, I think for me, what bothers me so much about other people trying to use AI as a shortcut for connection is that humans connect with humans. We never have, and we never will connect with zeros and ones. And just the way that I said that, I was like, this is so it, because we know on every level that AI literally is just zeros and ones. And that's why sometimes I have like hardcore fights with AI because I'm like, can you please explain this to me in my own words so that it can like enter my being in a way that I can understand. It'll talk to me, and I'll be like, these are not my own words. Like, this is my voice, and I'll like upload my entire book so that it will know my voice, and it'll go like, it'll just not listen to me, and I'm like, fucking hell, like, why aren't you listening to me? And then I go, Livia, you're literally talking to zeros and ones. Like, this is ridiculous. But oh yeah, the AI art physically pains me. Yes. Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts of like self-published authors. And they talk a lot about how there's this intense fear in like the author community that AI is going to take over authors and artists. And one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to, it's called the Creative Pen Podcast. She says like, that's nothing to be afraid of, because AI cannot make art from the soul, because AI has no soul, and true art is literally an expression of the soul. And just the way that she said that like was so like reassuring to me, that like all this writing, all this, creation, it's not pointless, because AI cannot replace the point of living a human existence. So again, here I'm like, this is totally off topic, but at the same time, I'm like, no, this is totally on brand right now, because it's all part of this conversation, which in and of itself is infinite, right? Because every conversation you have could go into another pathway, jumping off that whatever topic it is, and then we go, oh well, that's off topic, but like perhaps it's the things that are off topic that make the conversation meaningful, because otherwise it's again a flat line. It has no dimension, it has no depth. And that's why seeing someone like in person is always going to be more meaningful than talking on Zoom, because there's another dimension added to the interaction. I don't even know where the time is going. Holy moly. I love this conversation so much, because this is like what's really at the foundation of a lot of my thoughts is, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to like have a purpose? What does it mean to create purpose? And I think it's, claiming the permission to express yourself in a way that feels aligned with your soul. And Eva, I think that kind of goes back to the owning your existence that we were talking about. Something I recognize myself a lot in what you were saying, in the sense that I have felt and still often feel like I am not worthy of existing unless I am creating and unless I am producing and expressing. And something that has been really helpful for me is to, and again, I don't know if you resonate with this, but maybe someone else does, is this idea that even if I'm not physically producing something, my being is constantly expressing itself in different ways through the thoughts I have and through the things I feel. And I don't even know what's going, but like the owning your existence thing, I think it's about, kind of like I just said with Nico, it's like redefining creativity. I think what may be helpful for you is to redefine what it means to have a meaningful existence. And I'm curious if there are any associations or judgments or moral value that you've placed around what is an okay or appropriate way to exist. And however you're existing, there's the limiting belief of, okay, well, how I'm doing it doesn't fall within that appropriate box. And that's why I need to work harder than someone else. I need to earn my existence, where someone else, like, it's just their right of way. And obviously, this is a long conversation. I think much more than we could ever encompass on a shared group call like this. But I think it all comes back to what Nico did say, it's the owning your existence. What, Nico, I don't even remember what you said, but the way you said it was so poignant and so just validating, and it really resonated with me too. And that is this idea of like, also that I'm just thinking of like this idea, this thought of I need to own my existence. That's all it is. It's a thought. It's not an absolute truth. And you can never know the absolute truth because you're a subjective human. It's a story you tell yourself. And I think there's immense power in acknowledging that it's just a story you tell yourself. It's just a thought that your mind is having, because it almost makes you, at least for me, it empowers me that there's another way of thinking about it that I haven't yet discovered. And then for me, it's like trusting that at some point, like I'll find another way to think about it, or I'll discover another way to think about it, and trusting that that's going to appear on your path when you're ready to receive that new perspective. Because I think, at least for me, there are a lot of things again that like I want to do now, and I'm like, well, why can't I do it now? I again, I was listening to I listen to a lot of podcasts too. I was listening to a podcast about like trusting the universe and stuff. Yeah, that's what I listen to. And they were saying, if it hasn't happened yet, it's because your soul isn't ready to receive it yet. And I just thought that was so powerfully said, because that all comes back to trusting that, and I'm just repeating myself, trusting that that you will discover the thing that helps you when you're ready to have it help you. Sometimes things happen to us, or even if like 3 years ago you gave me something like, here's the perfect platter of how to do this. If you gave that to me 3 years ago, it wouldn't have made a difference, because my development, my spiritual, emotional, intellectual development wasn't ready yet to utilize that tool or strategy or connection or what have you. I feel like now I'm just going in all these weird directions. So I hope that makes any sense, Eva.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I actually am a bit overwhelmed by all of the thoughts. But what you said at the beginning, that it may be helpful to redefine or define what it means to me to have a meaningful day or life. That's a very important point, because I realize that every day I am unsatisfied at the evening, and I don't even know why.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like I haven't done anything meaningful today, and I don't know what it would mean to me to do something meaningful. I can put so many things in my day, and still I go to bed and think I haven't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why defining what it means to do something meaningful is maybe a very important part.
I love, like, again, I feel the explosion of emotion inside me again. Everything you just said, especially when you said, at the end of the day, I feel like I haven't done anything meaningful. That is just the definition of my existence. It doesn't matter if I had this community call. It doesn't matter if I wrote 1,000 words. It doesn't matter if I did a podcast. At the end of the day, I always start writing in my journal, why do I never feel good enough? That's literally how every day ends. And at this point, it's kind of just become a joke with myself. Is now I start every evening, I intentionally start it with, I don't ever feel good enough. And I almost use that as my prompt to reflect on the day, explaining all the things that make me not only good enough, but that make me beyond anything that can be measured as good enough. Because again, the concept of good enough, and I have a chapter titled Good Enough in my upcoming book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery. The concept of good enough, just like so many of these things we're talking about meaning and purpose and creativity and art, they're all subjective. What is artistic or creative for one person is not for another person. And something that has been really helpful for me that might be helpful for you to reflect on this week is about the meaning thing. I think what happens is, what I became so obsessed with at a certain point was, how can I do as much possible in one day? Because then at least maybe I can try and come close to feeling like I've accomplished something if I just do as much as possible. But that it actually works the other way around. And for me, something that I've started doing is, at the beginning of each day, I have one thing that I decide this is going to make today meaningful. And on Tuesday, obviously, it's always this call. And it's always, this is always my number one gratitude when I do my gratitude practice in the evening. But when you focus on one thing that would make each day meaningful, I think that almost relieves this huge pressure off yourself, because then it doesn't matter what else you do. Because if you've already decided, if you tell yourself this story, because again, telling ourselves stories isn't always a bad thing. Like we can choose to write the story that actually helps us feel good about ourselves and our lives. When you tell yourself the story that you only need one thing each day to feel meaningful, even if that's like, I was able to get out of bed today, I was able to get myself a glass of water and take care of myself today, and that's why I'm a meaningful human who is capable. Like, if you just pick one thing, then again, like, I'm talking in circles now, and I notice it. Then all the other stuff that you do, whether you answered your emails or did that or did groceries or didn't do groceries or went on a walk or didn't go on a walk, all of that doesn't matter anymore, because you decided that you're not going to let other circumstances decide for you that you are a meaningful human worthy of existence. I hope that helps to some extent.
Yes, it still makes sense, and it helps a bit, because then I start asking myself, but it's only one thing. The day has 24 hours, has so many minutes and so many seconds that can be filled with so much. And when I just, how do I choose one thing? And this one thing, why does this one thing is so important that it gives such a meaning to my day?
Yep, and that comes back to the existential piece, that you could pick any one thing, or you could pick any 10 things. And that is, again, the subjective experience. Because for me, I don't know if this example is helpful. Like for me, for example, I was very similar in the sense that I felt like if I got more done, I would be more meaningful and it would be better. But this example is so concrete for me, and that's why I'm going to use it, is like, I could spend my one thing on any specific day could either be, I'm going to answer as many emails and messages as possible and reply to as many social media comments as possible, and then I'll get like 50 things done today because there were 2 emails and 10 texts and 30 comments. And I'm also going to like 20 posts, because then I can add 20 things that I did today. I could do that, and then I would have achieved like 70 things. Or this membership call could be my one meaningful thing today, which I think, arguably, and I think everyone can agree with this, is infinitely more meaningful than doing the 70 things. Like, and that's again, like, how are you defining one thing? Because arguably, like, I'm saying this is one thing, but 1 and 2 and 3 and numbers are made up stories. Like, and you're probably like, oh my God, this is like way too much for my brain right now. But I think that there's, again, incredible freedom and power that comes when we acknowledge that literally everything we have defined in our life is made up. It's a construct of human consciousness. And like, that's why the numbers and, this being the one thing, we can't even compare it to answering 70 Instagram comments or what have you, because at this point, 70 versus 1 becomes arbitrary, because there's no way to attach tangible meaning to this connection that we have right now. So I think, to bring this full circle, to answer your question about, well, how do I choose? Something that has, again, been helpful for me is to let go of the how, and to make space for me to trust what feels aligned. And part of that being that I trust that the how-to will fall into place. Just to give a personal example, like with many of my books, like I write my books out of order. I don't start at chapter 1, chapter 2. I did that for Rainbow Girl just because that was like a chronological story, but like for the book I'm currently writing about autism and anorexia, or even my quasi-recovery book, I wrote all of the chapters out of order. And it wasn't until I knew, like, okay, I have all my content here that I want to put in this book, that I then took a step back of, okay, how am I going to organize this? Okay, well, it makes sense to first define quasi-recovery. Let's not put that at the last chapter. What is quasi-recovery? And the reason I share this example is because before I started writing the book, if I already had said, no, but I need to know how to organize it first, I wouldn't have written anything, because I would be so caught up in trying to find the map that didn't exist because it was my book that no one else has written before. I would be so obsessed with trying to find the map, but finding the map is actually the thing that causes us to get lost, because the thing that we're trying to find a map for literally has no map. So I think that's why, every day, or even every week, or whatever, again, day, week, it's all made up too. It's about asking yourself, like, what would make today meaningful for me? Or what would make this week meaningful for me? And even if it is just attending this membership call 1 week, like that's what would make this week meaningful. That in and of itself is so powerful, because then you've written your own permission slip to be worthy of existence, because you've redefined what meaning means for you. Does that, again, I'm going to keep asking, does that make sense?
Yes, and I think your sentence that finding the map is that thing that makes us lost, because the map we're searching for, the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that you're looking for a map doesn't actually have a map for it. Yeah.
It's such a powerful sentence.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean. It's like you just heard when I tried to repeat it, I didn't repeat it verbatim because I don't even know what I just said. Like I know what I just said, but I didn't know exactly how I phrased it. But I do know that the way I phrased it the first time around was more eloquent and beautiful than when I tried to rephrase it, because I wasn't thinking. It just flowed out of me, right? And that's the magic, is when we let things flow out of us without blocking it and saying, wait, before this can flow out of me, I need to decide whether it's worth flowing out of me or not. As soon as you've done that, it doesn't flow out of you authentically anymore, because you've placed a coffee filter right there. Like, nope, it's not allowed to go out of me because I need to filter it out. And I think this is, again, why there's, like what Amy said about you almost like touching the divine at a certain point. I think when I write, like the most meaningful things, when I say the most meaningful things, I've said this for years, but I say that definitely didn't come out of my head. I say, I don't know where that came from, but it definitely did not come out of my head. And I say that very intentionally, because the thing about our minds is that our minds are by definition a giant filter. That's all they are. Like if I am seeing the light being on, there's a light on, by the way, and I'm perceiving that, what's happened, the only way for me to perceive that light being on is my brain's filter saying, oh, a light is on. It's not, there are many steps between that are obviously unconscious, but everything we do is filtered through our brain. But I think when we speak from the soul and we don't try and filter it out, that's again when the meaningful connection comes, because in between the connection, there's no walls blocking that connection. And I think that's what made today so meaningful. And I am curious, if you guys, because I do, like I said, I am open to feedback. I don't ever want to do anything that makes you feel like, ugh, this is so annoying or something. So I am curious, like, how you feel about this kind of style of conversation. I'm curious, because there was a lot of just me talking authentically, and a lot of, talking about artists and going off topic, and not necessarily let's talk about autism and eating disorders. do you guys like this style, or is there any feedback you have for me? Yeah, I'm just curious.
Hi, it's Anna here.
Hi.
Anna and Katie. I feel it's more authentic the way you've done it today because it's more, I think if you have a topic, you're restricting yourself to kind of stick with that topic and you won't be able to naturally kind of go with the flow of where your heart or your head is at.
Yes.
And I think as well, like even today, I know sometimes you felt it wasn't on topic, but I think it was really on topic because it was about peeling back the layers and actually getting right back into the heart of why we are so structured with it. Like we stick with the man-made structure of stuff and numbers of weeks and hours instead of going with our own intuitive kind of structure of what it should be. And I think when we go with that, that life flows more comfortably. And yeah, so I think actually the topic was perfect. And yeah, it peeled right back to the whole reason maybe why an eating disorder develops in the first place. And it is about the thought process.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean that what you just said is totally like what I feel in my soul too about like honestly this is like one of the calls where I have felt most alive, more alive than I have in a long time because I didn't try, just like I said with that filter, I didn't try to put a filter in front of it. I didn't try to, block the intuition because I wanted to put on this show for everyone else, right? Which, so much we're constantly doing, to a certain extent, we're always putting a show on, we're always acting to some extent. But I think this is really, and when I speak to you, Anna and Katie, and Nico and Eva and everyone here, and many of my one-on-one clients, like those are the few times where I feel like I'm not putting on a show that is out of alignment with my internal show. So thank you all so much for being here. And that's it for today's episode. Obviously, we do a proper close at the end of each call where we go around and share our biggest takeaways and action steps, but I figured that wasn't necessary to leave in this podcast, right? I so hope you resonated with today's conversation, and myself and the other members would absolutely love to welcome you into the community so you can join us in real time for these soul deep conversations. You can join the Autistically ED Free membership at livelabelfree.com/membership. So again, that's livelabelfree.com/membership, or just click the link in the show notes. I hope to see you inside the community, and otherwise, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye bye for now.